our workshop rescheduled for today, Friday, January 24th, 2025, 12 p.m. Welcome everybody. Declaration of a quorum, 5 here today, 2 absent. Welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here. Brings us item C, hearing of citizens. We don't have any. Brings us item D. We're going to open up our public hearing to receive a presentation related to the CSISD Texas Academic Performance Report paper for the 23-24 school year.
Good afternoon, Mr. Horak, Dr. Harkrider. I'm here to update us with our public hearing for the Texas Academic Performance Report for the 23-24 school year, so the last school year. This taper report contains details for the district and our campuses on our academic performance, financial reports, staff programs, as well as demographics. There's a lot included in this report. We'll start with the district performance of our state of Texas assessment and academic readiness, the STAR performance, our attendance rates, dropout and graduation information, as well as college readiness, including those CCMR indicators will be part of it. We'll include our district profile, which is your student information, their demographics, staff information, as well as program information. There is also additional compiled information as part of this report, including some PEAMS financial reports, our accreditation status, which we are an accredited district, our campus performance objectives, the special education determination, which we meet requirements, report on violent or criminal incidents, student performance on post-secondary institutions, as well as, and we'll refer to our House Bill 3 goals. Excuse me. So the main components of this taper report are STAR, our post-secondary readiness, student and staff demographics, as well as publicly shared information. So we're going to begin with our STAR results. This is an overall look at it since we broke it down earlier in the year. This is our grades 3 through 8 reading. State is in blue, College Station ISD is in red. You'll see across the board grades 3 through 8 are above the state. This is all at the approaches passing level. Then we have grades 3 through 8 math. Once again, state is in blue, College Station ISD is in red. Remember, for our 7th grade, we have an advanced program, fast track in College Station ISD. So for 7th grade math, the majority of our students are taking above grade level math and not on grade level math. Grades 5 and 8 science and grade 8 social studies, once again, the state in blue, College Station ISD in red, once again above the state. And then we move to our end of course assessments. These are taken as they finish up that high school course. Again, the state in blue, College Station in red, and we succeed the state. Then post-secondary readiness, which is also linked to CCMR graduation and dropout. We had 1,030 graduates in the class of 23. Our graduation rate was 95.8%, which was almost 5% above the state. Annual dropout, we look at the other way, 2.8. We went a low percentage. We were at 2.8 while the state was at 6.3. College, career, and military ready graduates with all the multiple indicators as outlined in accountability was at 70.5. We are there a little below the state. And then when we look more at our graduates, our advanced dual credit completion is at 41.5%, which is below the state. However, look at our AP grads. We have 30.7% of our graduates that have participated in advanced placement courses, where the state is only 20%. The next category is college-ready graduates. Now this focuses on their SAT, ACT, and TSI performance as college-ready graduates, and we were above the state at 60.2. And then they pull out just TSI criteria graduates, and that was at 56.9, well above the state. We highlight our advanced placement program. We usually get an additional award as a district for our advanced placement exams. Across all of our subjects, 30.7% of our 11th and 12th graders graduate having participated in an AP exam, while the state's only at 24%. Then by subject, I broke down the participation rates, similar across our 4 core subjects. The biggest highlight for me and that I want to point out for this district is our AP performance. Out of all of our students who take AP exams, 81.5% of our students meet the criteria. The state's at 53%. We're well above the state and those students who not only take the AP exam, but meet the criteria. Then we look at SAT, ACT participation. For our ACT, SAT, we're at 67.6, where the state is higher. We have our students register. We do not do school-wide days. We're state. Usually we have a lot of districts that provide a school-wide day. 61% have met that criteria, well above the state. Our average SAT score is 1132, above the state. And our ACT is at 24.5, well above the state. Then we break it down to staff and students who is inside our multiple campuses. As of snapshot October of 23, we have 14,319 students. Our attendance rate for 22-23, because it lags a year, was 94.9%, again above the state. This is the breakdown of those 14,000 plus students by race, ethnicity. Our special populations of economically disadvantaged, emergent bilinguals, at-risk special education programs, 504, dyslexia, and gifted and talented. And then we move to staff. For 23-24, we had 2,101 employees, and that breakdown is shown here, where 48% of those are teachers. For our 48% of the teachers and the overall staffs, we have 1,009 total teachers. 28% of those actually hold an advanced degree. Our average experience is 12.5, again above the state. And our teacher turnover rate was at 17.6%, which is below the state, which is a good thing. And here is our years of experience, with 3% being beginning teachers, all the way to those with over 30 years at 3.5%. And then all of this report is online and available, as well as multiple other pieces of the report. So now I'll open it for any public comment or questions.
Out of curiosity, why don't we do a SAT day, district-wide?
When we are tracking CCMR and the SAT, ACT, so many of our students have already met that college entrance criteria that the counselors work with those individual students to offer them the opportunity, and they provide it very much so. We have a lot of students with TSI. Great question. Anything else?
No, just that there's a lot to be proud there, and I obviously, we've said this many times. I mean, we do in really almost every metric outperform the state. We're a premier school district in the state, is what it shows. But we've also said here though too, I mean, I certainly believe, and I hear from others as well, that we still have we still want to be even better than that, right? And still continue to grow all of our students, so.
Yes,
It's not just comparing to the state, right? It's tracking year to year, are we getting better? And those are important things too.
always another way to track and look at data and see how we can get better.
Yeah, and I love that this is available for everybody to see. It's the state, you know. Does this, yeah, I can ask you that, does this go, have you already presented this to the state and like, I mean, or is this, how, I know they're requiring these reports, how does that system work to do the take?
It actually starts at the state, and then it goes down to each and every LEA in the state. And then each district is required to do a public hearing or a public report, usually by spring break.
Perfect, thanks.
Anything else? Thank you very much. That will close our public hearing. Brings us to item E, attendance update. Ms. Wilson.
Dr. Harkrider, excuse me, Mr. Horak. Board of Trustees, I have some great information to share. So I just wanted to kind of talk about, we talked about an attendance incentive that was started here at College Station ISD, and we're really excited about what the results are. The reason for doing this again is just to get those kids back in class that we lost from the pandemic. We know that we're still down below what we had previous, and we also know that when we have kids in school, they learn better, they achieve better, they test better, and it's just better for our community. Another thing is, yes, we are funded on ADA versus enrollment, and there is big numbers associated with that, with kids being in school and getting that additional funding. Because we staff based on enrollment, and we get paid first on attendance. This is kind of what it looks like when a kid misses a day of school. So you can kind of look at that. If they've missed 2 days a month, they've missed 20 days in a year, 12% of instruction. And that is 17 hours of math, 34 hours of reading and writing, and a year and a half of education by the time they graduate from high school. So it's very important to get those kids in school. And I think our principals have done an amazing job of working around that, rallying their staff and getting the parents knowledge to get them back in class. So this is kind of what we're looking at. We were at 94.9 at the end of last fiscal year. We're at 95.3 this year. And yes, I did the math on that. If you look at our current students and you take them at 95.3%, that does add up to about $385,000 in additional funding for our school district. So it is big money. We do know that we've got to kind of keep that push and rally because to the end, because sometimes when the sun comes back out and it gets warm and we're not taking snow days, kids want to stay at home. So we want to make sure that we keep that percentage up and our kids are staying in school. So this is kind of what it looks like, because when we worked with our principals this semester and kind of taken a look at, I do want to point out this information, but then I also want to celebrate our secondary campuses. If you look at last year's information and you look at a grade level, that's the percentage of attendance per grade level. So you can kind of see when our seniors get up here and they get a little senioritis, their attendance drops down a little bit. And then we do, and we're hearing back from those elementary principals of just ways to incentivize those early ed and pre-K students to come to class. And sometimes those parents think of that more of a daycare versus education. And so we've got to get those kids in our classrooms. Kindergarten, you know, the first time out of their home, they get sickness a little bit more, so you can tend to see that. But you can kind of look at a historical information based on attendance and grade level. This is some celebration. This is just previous year. When we did our incentive this year, we looked at a 3-year average, and that was really just to kind of reward campuses that had already gotten their attendance up from COVID. And look at a 3-year average. But this is year over year, and you can see the huge strides our campus has done. Our biggest ones would be Rock Prairie Elementary, A&M Consolidated. If there was an award, she would have gotten it. But they are up to 95%. Huge strides from previous years. But there's only one campus that didn't move the mark, which is really exciting. Now this is when we take into account, you know, if you remember the incentive, if they get above 0.9, they get the full amount. So they get their enrollment base times $5. And so everybody above the top line got the money. College Station, if you look at the 3 years history, they've grown the most over here. And then same thing, Rock Prairie shows up as well. So you can kind of look at everybody above the line of getting the full percentage, the full $5. Anybody between the line are getting $1 to $4, okay? But great growth here. So you can kind of look at the starting point, everybody above grew. This is what it looks like on a payout basis. We're going to be giving $34,900 back to our campuses, and it's huge dollars. If they continue this process, you remember we have an additional multiplier. If the district can meet their rate, and then they can continue to keep their attendance rate, we're going to multiply this amount by 5. And so they can see as much as 10,000, 50,000 going to a high school campus to utilize for programs and growing students. So it's big dollars. Does anybody have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. E2 cell phone survey results.
All right, Mr. Horak, members of the board, I have results from our recent student cell phone use survey. This is part of a conversation that the district has been having for some time. As you are aware, the district for a little over 10 years has a bring your own device policy, which allows students to bring personal devices, including smartphones, to help aid instruction. Following the bring your own device policy and just with the enhancement of technology and the proliferation of social media and with phones just being more a part of our lives, the SHAC committee developed a recommendation for the board in 2018 to restrict cell phone use on campus to approved educational use only. And we'll look at the current policy as it's stated now as the SHAC committee amended it in 2018. But really that was just to provide some consistency across the board in the district and ensure that our teaching staff and our schools really had the final authority to say whether or not a cell phone could be used during academic time. And then last spring, SHAC recommended that we continue to evaluate the cell phone policy to limit distractions and off-task behavior. Again, cell phones just continue to be a part of the conversation as we have students in our care. During the school day, we have to look at what is going to be the best option for us as a school district and for our schools to make sure that we are providing them with the safest and most productive learning environment possible. So our current policy, we're not going to read it verbatim, but basically just says that the teacher in the classroom has final authority for the policies and procedures in their classroom as it relates to electronic devices, specifically cell phones here as we're talking about it, and then gives a little bit of guidance on how teachers and schools can move forward if those policies and procedures are not followed by students. And then it's broken down by grade level and campus, with giving our older students at the middle school and high school level a little bit more freedom to use their electronic devices during the school day, during lunchtime, during passing periods, during breaks, and then at the high school level giving some guidance on the students being able to use earbuds in at least one ear as long as a teacher or administrator is giving them direction. So that's where we're at currently with our policy. And really our next step to continue to evaluate it, kind of taking that recommendation from SHAC to look at it, was to get some community feedback. And so that's why we disseminated that survey. So we provided a survey during the month of December for intermediate through high school students, staff, and parents and guardians to give us some feedback. We also, throughout the fall semester, had the opportunity to get in front of some staff members through the Teacher Advisory Council and DEIC to talk a little bit about some of the implications of cell phones in the classroom, what they're seeing on a day-to-day basis, get some direct feedback, provide us with some information that maybe we're not seeing on a day-to-day basis that they are. We'll talk a little bit about that as it came out in the results. So here they are. Here we'll start off with just who filled out the survey, who completed. We had about 4,400 of our community members respond to the survey completely, with the majority of those being parents and guardians. And then our students, our next highest population, and staff. A little over half of the folks who filled out the survey were associated with high school, and then the other 2/4 intermediate and middle school. looking here at our demographics, we'll talk about parents and staff first, and then we'll talk about students and why that graph looks the way that it is. But our pretty similar results and outcomes for our parents and staff filling out this survey matches the aggregate data that we had on this first slide. Close to half are associated with high school, the other 2/4 intermediate and middle school. You'll notice that our intermediate students overwhelmingly filled out that survey, and admittedly that's because we had one specific campus fill out. It seems like almost every single student on that campus filled it out, so props to that campus that did that. But it does give us some good insight into maybe that particular campus and how students are using them at the 5th and 6th grade level. So we're kind of taking that caveat as we roll through some of these surveys and really looking at the staff and the parent data as we're moving through this. So we asked 5 questions and allowed folks to provide some comments, and we'll look at some of those. But the first question we asked really kind of goes back to the idea of bring your own device to school and that being an aid for learning. And so we asked how often are cell phones being used for schoolwork or for positive learning experiences. And you'll notice of the students that filled out the survey, they're saying that they're not using it or they're rarely using it for schoolwork. We asked parents how often they believe that cell phones are being used for positive learning experiences. And it seems parents believe that they're being used occasionally, but not all the time. And our staff kind of has that same sentiment based on the results. All right, and then we asked the inverse of that. How often are cell phones being used for non-academic purposes? Students are responding, at least those that responded to the survey, that they're not using cell phones for schoolwork, and they're also not using them for things that aren't schoolwork. So again, we're taking the results as they came in. But parents believe that students should generally not be using their cell phones during the school day as it relates to non-academic purposes. And then we asked staff how often they actually observe students using their cell phones for non-academic purposes.
Okay, so one is believe, one was believe and one was observe.
Well, I mean, because a parent can't observe their student during the school day, using their cell phone, but a staff member can. So we wanted to ask these questions honestly so that we could get honest feedback. Because a parent, they'll take it from their student, oh, I'm using my cell phone for this and that, but it's going to be their perception, not as much of an observation for them. And so we had to tailor those questions to those different demographics as we were asking them. So for staff, they're observing students, those that respond to the survey are observing students use their cell phones for non-academic purposes, for the most part pretty frequently or sometimes.
I think,
Go ahead.
and when I read that, I think the important part of it too is with the parents, the should language as opposed to what is actually happening.
Yes.
That's different too. So.
Yes, actually, yes, it's the should. I agree that it's not what they're doing, it's what they should be, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and it shows that there's a big difference between what parents think their students should be doing versus what staff thinks is happening. I mean, that's a pretty big difference.
All right, we asked about social interactions because this question really kind of came out of some conversations that we had with parents in our coffee chat sessions, as well as asking staff members kind of what they feel like their biggest concerns are, and so we wanted to ask about how they're noticing students behaving in relation to cell phone use. We asked students how do they feel that using cell phones at school affects their social interactions with peers. For the most part, neutral, but pretty even distribution on the answers for positive, somewhat positive, negative, and somewhat negative. Parents are also of the understanding that their child's social interactions as it relates to cell phone use is fairly neutral, but there's definitely a population of our parents that believe that students using cell phones during school time can be promoting some negative behaviors and social interactions or affecting them negatively. And then we asked staff how do they think cell phone use affects social interactions among students during the school day. A little over half that responded to the survey noted that it was negative, and then the next largest answer was somewhat negative. All right, and then we asked about some of these concerns, and again, these were from some responses that we had from parents and staff about some of their concerns, and so we wanted to provide them with some options to select their concerns, and then we also provided them with an opportunity to fill out any additional concerns that they may have. Students, for the most part, parents and staff feel like cell phones are a distraction. Their main concern was that cell phones can be distracting, and then the distribution for students between cyberbullying and screen time was fairly similar, and screen time for staff and parents was also a concern. For staff, it seems like they're seeing cyberbullying also being a piece of that as well. These were really just the most common things that were written in the comments. Students had concerns about cell phones allowing other students or themselves to be able to cheat on schoolwork, getting them in trouble, and then across the board for students, staff, and parents, decreased social interaction was mentioned quite a bit.
These are comments, not multiple choice?
These were comments, and then we kind of just pared
Sure.
them down to make sure that
Okay.
it was easily digestible for
Yep.
our viewing audience and for yourselves. Parents, lots of comments about exposure to inappropriate materials or things that they may not approve of, or they don't have control over what their students are doing or what other students may show them on an electronic device. So that was a big concern of our parents. And then staff, most notably, wrote in the comments that they were noticing that cell phones were causing drama between students during the school day. Rumors, fights, those kinds of things. Okay, policy enforcement. So we looked at the policy. We did want to know kind of what everyone's perception was of the policy and how well they feel like it's being enforced. For the most part across the board, it's understood that the policy is usually being enforced, with rarely being the next highest choice on there that was selected across the board there. And then we asked just about the idea of cell phones potentially being restricted further or not restricted at all during the school day. And so for the most part, not a big consensus across the board here from our community. Students and parents both align with how the current policy is currently written, as far as allowing students to be able to use their cell phones during the day, bring them to school, have them for academic purposes, and then as the policy allows, as it's written in the handbook, for those designated break times, like for lunch, passing periods before and after school, those kinds of things. Staff were the only ones that highlighted that full restrictions would be supported, with a little less than half of the staff members that responded to the survey noting that there. And then we did provide an opportunity for people to leave additional comments, just any thoughts or comments that they had about cell phone use during the school day. Students and parents, their main comment that they provided to us was that they would like to continue to have the ability to have a cell phone on campus in the event of emergency. That was the main comment that was provided. Students also mentioned that they do use their cell phones to access online resources. Schoology was brought up quite a bit, that students are using their phones to get online to access Schoology. And then specifically at the high school level, had a number of comments about students being able to communicate with each other for classwork as they're doing projects and things like that. Parents and staff, again, more concerns written about distractions, drama, social media, texting. Mental health was a big piece of this as well. And then with our staff, quite a few comments about other devices like headphones, smartwatches, We did get some feedback from our DEIC members and from our teacher advisory council, specifically about our younger students at the elementary and intermediate levels, maybe not bringing a cell phone to school, but having access to a different kind of device that allows them to communicate one or two way to their parents, allows them to text or call just those numbers, or they do have some kind of smartwatch that allows them to voice text or send their parents a voice memo, and those were brought up as well for consideration. And so kind of our key takeaways looking at the data in the aggregate, generally students of the students that responded are saying that cell phone use for academic and non-academic purposes tends to be nominal. I will say too, not a frequent comment, but we did have quite a few, again, because a lot of these kids were intermediate kids that responded. A lot of them were saying they're not using a cell phone during the school day because they don't have a cell phone. So again, taking that as a caveat to the data that we actually have. And then again, distraction being the main concern across the board for our students, staff, and parents. Parents believe or feel like cell phones should not be used often in general. And a little more than half of those folks that responded would support a policy that allows phones for academics and during those designated break times. Staff members that completed the survey observed cell phones being helpful for learning on occasion and observe frequent non-academic cell phone use. Again, concerns for distraction, cyberbullying, drama initiated by social media and texting, and a little less than half support restricting cell phone use completely, while some would allow for academics only. And so kind of looking at these takeaways as we discuss these as a leadership team, because our community didn't have a general consensus here, there's not really a recommendation we're moving forward with. For any policy update at this time, we'd like to take these data points and dig a little bit deeper with some of our campuses and get some more information about how they're using the district policy to implement it at the campus level. Lots of good insight from our teacher advisory council about how individual campuses are using the overall district policy to either be more restrictive or provide a little bit more freedom depending on the campus. But again, because we don't have a general consensus across the board here in the community, not necessarily moving towards any recommended policy update at this time. So, any questions, comments, general discussion about cell phone use during the school
I'm not sure I formulated a specific question, but because there's a lot to take in. I am very glad we did the survey and try to address because there are a lot of people on both sides of this issue. We've probably heard from some of them. I'm also glad you point out that it's unfortunate we didn't have more high school students respond. It's almost like the student part, we really do have to take with a grain of salt for many reasons, but also because there was just some intermediate, and that's a different population. I mean, to me, the things that stand out is that all of them thought it's distracting, and I think, I know it's distracting. I have a cell phone, right, and so try everywhere. But if you put the staff that they think it's a negative for I don't know if you will go back to that one about what do people they think is negative or not. You take negative at 50% and
somewhat
negative at 34%. How do you think cell phone use affects social interactions among students during the school day? That is huge to me. And so in my mind, that's kind of the big picture question is how, because I think I would agree with that. How do you balance that then with some of the positive uses of the phones? And particularly, Schoology. I think we have taught our kids over the last few years to use Schoology and use it in other ways. But I don't know. And then I think the other thing is the enforcement ones stood out. Where was the enforcement question? I mean, you pointed out for staff, usually is a high point, but so was rarely. I mean, the same. So I think another thing that I hear is the consistency. I think we heard that in the Teacher Advisory Council as well, so maybe there's not a recommendation for any change to our policy, but I would think at a minimum, consistency, in my mind, would be something that would be helpful. And again, that's my last one, I'll let some other people speak, is I mean, I do care about what the parents think, for sure. But as we talked about, they don't see it in the classroom as much. So I really put a lot of weight on what the staff says about this, and how it's affecting not only the student learning, but also, just the student growth and relationships and that social part that you talked about. So.
Yeah, basically a policy is only as good as those that are enforcing the policy.
Yeah.
So whatever's written on a piece of paper is there. It's the staff, it's the administrators that are enforcing the policy. So you've got right now K through 6. Really, we don't have any issues. So it's functioning fine. All 3 middle schools, from my understanding, are a little bit more restricted than the high school, and all 3 administrators feel like that process is working. So you have so many mixed reviews between teachers, and a lot of our teachers, I would say staff-wise, a lot of them will probably are secondary because they deal more with cell phones than elementary and intermediate. It is kind of split. They can be restrictive right now in a classroom if you want to, and so we have some classrooms that kids know you don't bring your cell phones, you don't talk about it, and others, cell phone is free reign. So I think the next step for us, besides showing the data to our entire team, is potentially our 2 high schools, because from a different district level with all these mixed results, basically you're back to square one because it's pretty much 50-50 on each side. So if what I would like to see is our high schools sample their own students and their own staff members, get that data, and then their leadership team decide if they get more restrictive or not and what that looks like. Because in the end, if it's something that they took information from their campus on, develop their protocol, chances are it's going to be enacted and it's going to work. Otherwise, it's us as Big Brother coming down, telling them what they're going to do, and nothing's going to change. So I'd like for them to take that deeper dive and decide as a campus, do they need to get more restrictive, or are things working the way they feel like they should be working?
I think the slide we haven't talked about that jumped out to me is where it's talking about how parents believe they're using cell phones versus, let me see, this one right here. So this is how parents, the way I'm reading it, believe students should be using their cell phones
It's not their opinion.
versus what we see our staff are actually observing students using their cell phones. So to me, that says that what our parents are generally saying they believe isn't what's happening in the schools. To me, that just jumped out because that says to me that we do have a discrepancy between what our parents would think is right and what's really going on. And how we solve that is for you guys to think about. But I see a lot of concerns when we have parent and the one about the concern. There was one just called concerns. I mean, parents do have some legitimate concerns, or else the blue pie slice would be bigger. And obviously, our staff are at a place where we feel like there are concerns with cell phones. So I know it's a really, really complex issue to figure out the best way to do it. But anyway, it just looks like we still have some work to do.
No, for sure, and I think what we're giving you now is a big picture across the district, over 4,000 responses. So if you take those campus principals, regardless of what level, it doesn't matter to me, decide to take that next step, and I think it'd be good for them too, to get their data zoned in to their kids, their teachers, their parents, and then have a conversation of, hey, we think we want to explore change based on what our middle school folks have said. Then I think that's definitely a step in the right direction, because you're probably going to come up with a new protocol that you have a shot to be successful because everybody kind of came to the table and agreed on it.
I think in the end, no matter what, I mean, the nation's dealing with this, every school district's dealing with this. My wife put it best to me, I never thought of it this way, when we were in school, we went to school, we got there, you know, at 8, then we got done at 4, and then extracurricular, and then we went home. And all the stuff that happened at school and it stayed at school, because if someone called you, they called you on the landline, and maybe you had a conversation, but you didn't have to deal with it until you got back there 12 hours later. And I didn't think of it that way, and all cell phones do is give 24-hour access to kids all the time. My statements here are gonna sound like we just need to cut cell phones out, put them in bags, magnetic bags, whatever. I get it, I can sit here and say that. I think we have an issue just like everybody else. It's one of those things we're gonna have to work on. But as far as parents knowing or believing what their kids are doing and this and that, if you see your kid at home, however they're acting on their phone is how they're acting on their phone at school. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. So that shouldn't be a shock. But at the same time, what our staff is seeing on that blue right there with frequently at 67.1, I don't disagree with that. I can probably guarantee it. And it's weird because on our policy, also if you can go back to that first slide, we put this in the teachers' hands, and that's the struggle, and I get it. And I don't want them to have to do any more work than they're already doing, but the unfortunate piece, and flip to the next one, I'm sorry. Electronic devices are allowed for acceptable educational use before school, during lunch, and after school, so long as you use the device. Do not interrupt the educational environment. The piece on this policy right here, acceptable educational use. I promise you, before school, during lunch, and after school, they ain't doing anything educational on that phone. I mean, that's just where we're at, and that's fine. At this point, there's only so much we can do, like Tim said. Big brother, we can only go so far at this point. It's one of those things we're just gonna have to keep working on. I love polling your high schools individually, seeing what each campus looks like. This is a big 20,000, 30,000 viewpoint, I get it. But you bring it down to campus level, I think you're gonna get some info, that's very good feedback, and we can adjust accordingly, so that makes sense.
And my biggest concern moving forward, you know, it's kind of like our legislative priorities that you guys adopted, that we wanted more local control. So our biggest concern moving forward is there's multiple bills that have been introduced at the legislative level. None have been heard yet, but within the next 4 to 5 weeks they will be. And so there's been some threats from the Commissioner of Ed that cell phones will be restricted. That concerns me from a standpoint of now there's Big Brother coming down, and we're having to institute potentially a new law with cell phones that we don't feel like fits our community. And so that's when that becomes problematic of what that's going to look like. But we're not going to borrow trouble. We'll see what happens. It won't change our approach and what we want to do moving forward with some additional surveys to kind of dial in some results.
Are there other similar districts our size that have implemented like full restrictions? Like, do we have any of that data? Or I think some went into play this year, so it might be worth looking at to see if they had success.
Yeah, we have just anecdotal information from districts around the state. For the most part, reports, at least at the administrative level, have been that it's been helpful to remove the distraction. Again, here in our community, I think the results kind of show that the idea of having a cell phone at the school is helpful, especially for our older kids when they're involved in extracurriculars or they need to get in touch with their parents. I think that's a fact of our world today, and I think that's the results here show that. But yeah, we can definitely dig into some more specific information. Yeah, a lot of school districts made some significant changes this year, and I think they'll probably be digging into how it's affecting their outcomes, and I'm sure we'll see some results from that by the end of the school year.
Yeah, the surprise for us is some of the districts that we've looked at that had done surveys, which is why we did one. Their survey results did not mirror our survey results. They were very much 60+% against cell phone use from parents, and staff. Ours were more closer to 50-50, even some were 70+% yes, get rid. And so there was much more support to have kind of an ultimate ban than our data. That's obviously not what our parents want, at least 50% of them don't. So it's a little bit different.
Well, I think it might be helpful for us to, if we're gonna reach out for other information and other surveys, to be really specific about the type of cell phone, policies we might be considering, because I think it's different to say, hey, you cannot bring a cell phone on campus. A parent would feel one way about that, versus you cannot have that cell phone on during school hours. In a case of an emergency, they're gonna flip that phone on and call their parents. They can turn it on as soon as the bell rings and see if their parent has said, hey, after school you're doing this instead of this. So it could also be that just maybe some more specific directions on what parents are thinking too, because I would look at that as a parent in two very different ways.
Yeah, and I want to be extremely clear and black and white. We are not exploring any policy where students would not be able to bring a cell phone on campus. None at all. That's not even up for discussion.
Yeah, because I would follow up on two things. One, I like when you pointed out, again, that slide about what the parents think it or believe is going on. So to see those numbers that are 70% believe either nearly, never, or rarely should be used, right? That was the most all. And then to follow that back up, and again, I'm not sure if it should be used or are they thinking they're not using them, and then not want to restrict them more. So I'm not sure I'm aligning those to their answers there, right? If they're saying they never should be used or rarely used, and but I think your point is right, that it's we're not saying, or nobody here is proposing yet no phones. It's just really how do we restrict them and limit those or how we could possibly, and limit distractions and have kids focus on academics. And then the other thing I wanted to make, and it's kind of a little bit to your point, Jeff, on looking at the policy, and this is a question too. I think some of the research out there, outside of just limiting phones, is what age does this most impact students? I mean, at least some of the things that I've seen, it's not your juniors and seniors. They're maybe learning how to handle things better, maybe. It's those middle, younger grades. Maybe it is the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And so I just think understanding and differentiating, like we do in our policy, but really understanding the different needs at the different ages is still really critical too.
I'll just chime in here and try not to talk too much because I'm getting my voice back. But and I'll start by saying I'm coming from the paradigm of the research that I've looked into, that this is a major problem.
Yeah.
Whether the kids, I appreciate us getting their opinion, but if you look at cell phones, it's almost like a drug. And if you ask, or an alcohol, if you ask somebody if they have an alcohol problem, even if they do, they're going to say no. So looking at what the teachers and the staff are seeing at the campuses, I think is the most important thing to do. So that being said, I'll also say that I come from this paradigm of, as a school board, as school administrators, so often we are reacting to what higher levels of government require or mandates that are put onto us. And this is an opportunity, I think, especially when we have a situation like this where you've got, and again, I kind of interpreted, Austin, some of this a little bit differently than you did. I saw it, and again, maybe it's just more of my paradigm I'm looking at this at. It's a lot more negative. But this 50-50 split, that this is really an opportunity for us as a school board to actually take a lead on this issue and the administration and not necessarily just follow what the kids want or the staff wants. What is actually best for our school district and our students. And so I think looking at, and many of y'all, Dr. Harkrider and some other folks have mentioned the idea of, grade-specific, campus-specific, that's probably the best way to go about doing it. So I appreciate y'all trying to kind of look at it from that viewpoint. But it's something that I think we need to change, whatever that might be. Again, y'all are looking into it more and talking to the campus folks is a good idea. But I would just urge, I've got potentially less than a year left on the board, and to not let this die, because it's just that important, I think, as far as College Station ISD and doing its little part to help the next generation, because we've got a mental health crisis out there, and some of the research puts a lot of it on these things that we carry around each day.
Anything else?
I need to add that I do support that and not letting this end at this meeting, right? I think there is certainly more to continue to learn about it. There is more and more research happening, and then there's more for us to learn throughout our own district too, so.
All right. It was a lot easier when I just had to worry about staying out of Miss Esther's office. Really.
You never did before.
I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, we don't have there's not payphones. So yeah, so you can't just say, hey, no phones, because unless we, it's crazy.
All right, that'll bring us to adjourn, and we'll see y'all here in 9 minutes.